million other kids your age think somebody's going to be disappointed? Yeah. You know, the point is there are unrealistic hopes. Let's just be honest. There are. But that's not what the Bible's talking about. When the Bible talks about a hope, it is talking about go to the bank, it's a done deal. It's often defined as a confident expectation. In the verbal form, I believe it's expectant reliance. Okay, that's the definition. In other words, it's a Bible hope. So let me give you an example of what faith substantiating hope. For instance, when I was 16 years old, I walked down an aisle at the Marquette Manor Baptist Church. I was seated on this side, small little chapel. My dad started a church out in the suburbs of Chicago. It was actually the same church in 2 locations. And he was preaching out there one Sunday night. And I remember walking down that aisle that 16th year, at the end of my junior year, grabbing my dad's hand and saying, "Dad, I think God's calling me to preach." I'll never forget that. Don't go into the whole story, but I mean, tears streaming on my face, Dad, I think. My dad looked at me and said something that shocked me. He said, "Jim, your mother and I have known it for a long time. We've been praying for you." Now, at that point, I responded to the call to preach, and I set my face, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pursue the call to preach in my life. But I'm going to be honest with you. The greatest reason I fought the call to preach was not because I was an I hate God, get out of my life rebel, because I really wasn't. Really, the reason I fought with God about my call to preach was I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I had the skill set, the ability, certainly not the personality. And when you're shy and an introvert, preaching is just not on your radar screen. It's not. I mean, what you want to do is kind of anonymity. That's my middle name, okay? When it comes to skill set and how God made me, we call it the Gelderen shyness. 2 of my daughters are afflicted with it. One in the middle is not afflicted at all. She got the other side. She is not at all. She's the kind, if some guy is out of line at Baptist College Ministry, she's the first one in his face saying, "What do you think you're doing?" So she's a little bit different. Okay. But the point is, I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could do this call to preach stuff. But I began to follow God. In other words, in all of my weakness, I got out of the boat, and I knew this much. I cannot do this. And if it's going to happen, God's going to have to do it. Now, I didn't understand anything like I've heard here, but I knew this much. I can't do it. I can't do it, but God's called me, so here we go. So in a certain sense, can I say, I was trusting a verse like, "Faithful is he that calleth you." Could you finish the verse? "Who also will do it." I tell young people all the time, God does not call the gifted, he gifts the called. So you just follow God and you will find him giving you what you need to do his will. He will enable you to do it. He will gift you to do it. Now here I am 35 years later. You know what I can tell you? He has substantiated my hope. And I will be honest with you. I'm just being honest with you, dead honest with you. When somebody comes to me and said, "That message really helped me," it still surprises me. It's kind of like, you got to be kidding me. When I listen to myself preach, I'm thinking, "Oh, man, maybe you should get another job." You know what I'm talking about? I don't know if preachers do the same thing. I hate to hear myself preach. It's kind of like, man, you got problems. Okay, you know, how does anybody listen to me? Okay, now here's the point, friends. God, if you will follow him, his calling on your life, he'll do it. And when you do it for 34 years and watch him do it, you come no longer, can I say this? 1 Thessalonians 5:24 to me is no longer theory, it's reality. It's every day. Like, wow, look what God did. Wow, look what God did. This is amazing. I still have not lost the wonder of God using my preaching. That still blows me away. Still absolutely blows me away. Like, you got to be kidding me. That's crazy. You see what I'm saying, friends? He substantiates our hope when we follow him. He says, "Come." We get out of the boat thinking, "God, I can't walk on water." He says, "You don't worry about the walking on water. What you need to worry about is trusting me and obeying me." You know, that'd be a great song. Somebody ought to write some song called like "Trust and Obey." I think that'd be a great song. Trouble is, we sing it, but we don't live it. He says, "Come." And okay, you know what I did? A 16-year-old kid and a whole lot of imperfections. You know what I did? I came. And 35 years later, I'm thinking, "God, could you give me 20 more years? I'm such a ball. I really rather not die. Could you, could you give me some more time here? I'm having such a ball." Why? Because God enables you to do what he calls you to do. And it is marvelous. It's really neat. I don't know about you, but walking on water is fun. You ought to try it sometime. Now, what I mean by that is, you will, when you follow Jesus, depending on his strength, not yours, I don't care who you are, you will walk on water. In other words, you look back and say, "That was impossible." But God did it. You see, that's what happens when you and I obey, okay? We talked about that passage of Scripture there in 2 Corinthians. And, of course, what's it talking about? Bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of who? Christ. So what happens when you obey Christ in dependence on his strength, not yours? He will substantiate your Bible hopes. theory will become reality so that you can stand with confidence. Did you think Dr. Flanders was talking about theory when it comes to corporate prayer today? Do you think he was talking theory? No, it's not theory. It's reality. Why? One day it was theory for him, just like for all of us. But it has become reality. Why? Because that's what faith does. It substantiates your hopes. There are pastors in this room, corporate prayer is not theory for you. In fact, it's so reality, you can't live without it. You see, it's like personal prayer. For some of you, personal prayer is, oh, I know I just need to spend more time with prayer. And my 5 minutes isn't cutting it. Okay, man, I'd like to do more. For youth, prayer is right now theory. For some of this room, prayer is reality. It's like, I can't get by without 30, 40 minutes. I've got to have that much time. You can't live without it. Why? Because it's no longer theory, it's reality. So that's what faith does. It substantiates Bible hopes. But it says something else. Oh, I love this. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. You know the amazing thing about things you can't see that's going to shock you, you can't see them. That's the amazing thing. Now, what does God say about things you can't see? They're eternal. Sounds like they're pretty important, aren't they? You know, a lot of teenagers, oh, God's not real to me. I don't know how many times, I talk to a teenager and you ask them about their walk, oh, God's just not real to me. Okay, what's the problem? Okay, the problem is faith. Because faith brings evidence that drives you to a conviction about things you can't see. See, the word evidence is the idea of evidence that drives you to conviction. Now, I have never done jury duty. I shouldn't say that. I've been called for jury duty. I don't know why, but in Greenville, South Carolina, when I lived there for 16 years, I was called all the time. I was down in the courthouse all the time. But Greenville did it a weird way. I don't know, maybe this seemed weird to me, but on Monday, the defense and the prosecution would pick all the juries for the week. And if you didn't get picked on Monday, you got to go home and not come back. So goal, don't get picked. And I had an absolute surefire way. I never got picked. They'd ask him, what do you do for a living? You say something like, I'm an independent Baptist evangelist. And I am telling you, that you could just see him looking, oh, he's one of those. Probably a conservative Republican. Whatever. You could just kind of see it. I remember I was in a jury pool. And this is Greenville, South Carolina, and the judge, real mean-looking guy. I don't know. Judges and me, I just don't know that we really could be friends. But anyway, the judge, real mean-looking guy, and he looks out the jury pool. How many of you have a conviction against the consumption of alcohol? I'm thinking, I'm in the buckle of the Bible Belt. Everybody's going to raise their hand. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I would expect anybody to raise their hand, okay? I think per capita, Wisconsinites drink the most alcohol of anybody in the whole United States. It's by far. So, that's factoring in the kids and the people at Falls Baptist Church, okay? And that's factoring them all in, so the averages are pretty high. But anyway, so I'm in here, and I'm expecting everybody to raise their hand, so I just raised my hand. I'm looking around, nobody's raising their hand. Just me and one other. And the judge looks at me and says, sir, can I talk to you? I'm going, oh, great. Judge comes up there. I'm talking mean guy. Somebody needs to talk to him about his manners. And I coming up there, real mean guy. He says, sir, do you think you can set your convictions aside and judge this case according to the merits of the law? And I looked at him and I laughed. I said, I could try, but I don't guarantee anything. They didn't pick me. Okay, great. I accomplished my goal. That's great. You say, preacher, why did you not want to get picked? Well, the real reason is I didn't want to lose 4 days. But I will tell you, there's another reason. This wasn't the big one. Who wants to make a really life-altering decision about something you didn't see? The defense and the prosecution parade evidence across the jury that is designed to do what? Bring them to a conviction about something they didn't see. You see, that's what faith does. Now, I'll give you a little more of a Bible illustration. Have you ever done this? Sometimes they'll say, preacher, this sounds a little spooky, evidence of things you cannot see. Okay, well, it's really not. Have you ever stepped out on a fall day outside, and boy, some cold hits you, just hits you on one side, ball cap goes flying off, and leaves are scattering across the thing, and the trees are rustling, and you turn to somebody and say, whoa, it's windy today. Now, the person doesn't look like you like, what are you, weird, man? No, you didn't see the wind. You saw evidence that drove you to a conviction that it's what? Windy. It's like this. I don't know if you're a Midwesterner like I am, but we Midwesterners, there's certain natural catastrophes that just don't bug us too much, like tornadoes. I tell people, I've seen 3 funnel clouds. Okay, you can see a tornado. You can usually dodge it, get away from it, etc. And they don't scare me too much. Okay, tornadoes, but other ones do, like earthquakes. That's weird. Hurricanes, they're a mile wide. I mean, miles wide, I should say. I mean, hurricanes make me nervous, okay? Because, and I've literally found this, people in Florida, hurricanes don't make them nervous. I mean, after all, they've lived through who knows how many. Okay, but you ever notice that weather.com sometimes, I don't know, I get fascinated by hurricanes. You know, Hurricane Florence is coming in, get on weather.com, and they have some rookie reporter out there. Have you ever noticed? Fresh graduate from weather school, about 22 years old. He's out on the beach. He said, Florence is here, it's just about here, you know, and you're seeing, you know, his hat flies off, and you're seeing fish fly by, and you're seeing water come by, palm trees like a U, and come to think of it, you never see the guy again. That was his last reporting duty, poor guy, you know, I put him out there, and you're looking at this going, whoa, it's windy out there. Do you know you didn't see the wind? You saw evidence. And it drove you to conviction about something you didn't see. This is what I love about faith. It brings evidence that drives you to conviction about things you can't see. Now, here's the point, friends. What's our problem is we say we believe God, but we don't believe him enough to obey him in dependence on his strength, not ours. Because just knowing it intellectually won't do it. Now, I'm going to use an illustration. Please pardon this. It's a little teenagey, but that's usually my audience. But it will help you. It really help you. How many will be honest that you like roller coasters? Can I see your hands, please? Okay, we've got a few roller coaster people. I think I have ridden my last roller coaster. I've come to the point where I don't know, I like blood on only one side of my body. You know what I'm talking about? There comes a point you're thinking, I can't handle this anymore. But anyway, I had an older sister. She's now with the Lord, but I will tell you, she never met a roller coaster she did not absolutely love. I have never seen a trace of fear on my sister's face, ever. I don't care how tough the roller coaster was. So when you went to the amusement park with my sister, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You look at a roller coaster thinking, I really don't want to ride this. She's laughing. She would get on the roller coaster and laugh the entire time. While other people scream, plot and plan their funerals, she's laughing the entire time. So, you know, here it is. If I can give you an illustration. Let's imagine that you were a physics guy and you studied roller coasters and you came to the conviction, not conviction, but you came to pretty much the idea that there's a certain roller coaster that's got to be the funnest roller coaster. I mean, you study G's. You know what G's are? You know, when you feel like you weigh 500 pounds, and then negative G's are when you feel like you're going to be thrown out of the coaster to your death. You know what I'm talking about. And speedy. So you study the speeds, the drops, the G's. You study it all. You're a physics master, and you come to the conclusion that roller coaster is the best roller coaster in North America. It's got to be, pardon the English, the funnest. Okay, so what do you have to do, hang on, to substantiate your hope that it's fun? What do you have to do to bring evidence to drive you to conviction that that is a great roller coaster? What do you have to do? And the answer is, write it. Well, there's something else you have to do. Get in line, because that is part of the experience. So I remember, you know, my older sister, she's laughing, thinking it's funny, and I'm thinking, so, you know, what are you going to do? If you're scared half to death, what are you going to do? If your older sister's not scared at all, here's what you do. You act like you're not scared, even though you are. Okay, you know what I'm talking about? And you get in line, and you're thinking, I don't know if I should do this. I'm a little nervous, you know. And so they hire psychologists, maybe you didn't know this, to freak people out before they get on the ride. Have you ever seen this? Warning, if you have heart problems, do not ride this ride. You're thinking, I didn't when I got in line, but I think I'm getting one. You know what I'm talking about? Go a little further. Warning, if you have skeletal problems, do not ride this ride. Now you're pretty sure you're going to be maimed. Then a little further. Warning, if you have ingrown toenails. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's just one warning after the other. And then you come right up to there, and there it is. There it is. There it is. The chicken exit. You say, preacher, I've been on a lot of roller coasters. I've never seen the chicken exit. Oh, yeah, I have. Has a little wheelchair on it. You just go out the wheelchair ramp kind of backwards. Or the other one is you kind of act like you're going to get on the roller coaster, but just keep going like you just rode it, and you go right through. That's the chicken exit, okay? But here you are. What are you going to do? Your older sister's riding it. There are some things worse than death. You know what I'm talking about? Like being made fun of the rest of your life. And so all of you have done it. You've all done it. I don't want to ride this. I don't ride, but especially if it's a younger sister, what are you going to do about that? So you get in, you know, next to your sister, and then, you know, that thing that comes over you, you know what I'm talking about? Click. Every time I've heard the click, every time, no exception, my next thought is, you are such an idiot. That is always my next thought. Like, now you can't get out. You're stuck. So your prayer life improves. You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking literally. My prayer life improved at that moment, especially when I was a kid and didn't really have much relationship with the Lord. I mean, I'm praying now. That first hill, you know what I'm talking about? Click, 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 click. Man, you're praying. You're singing, Lord, I'm coming home. I mean, all the way up. Click, 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 click. I mean, hanging on for dear life. My sister would be laughing. Click, 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 click. All the way to the top. Click, click, click. 120 seconds of sheer blur. You know what I'm talking about? Every roller coaster I've ever ridden, there was one part in the roller coaster when you're sure you're going to be decapitated. You know what I'm talking about? There's a bar coming right for your neck. You duck, and then it drops. Feel like an idiot. Okay, but anyway, and at the end of 120 seconds, you get off the roller coaster, and if you did what I did, here's exactly what you did. You got off the roller coaster, and this is particularly my teenage years, I would say, that was great. Let's do it again. Now, why did you do it again? Because now you have substantiated your hope. It's great. It's fun. You have evidence that drives you to conviction. Wow, that's a great roller coaster. So you come back and tell people, oh, you got to ride this roller coaster, particularly when you're a teenager. Now, don't miss this, friends. God works in our heart. Perhaps even this week, God works in your heart. You know, I really need to get that right. I got some issues in my life. I need to get with my pastor, get honest about some needs in my life, and you get in line. And then you know what Satan does? Warning, you do that, you'll never be trusted again. And he keeps warning, he keeps lying to you. And you know what I've watched a lot of people do? Thank the Lord, it's the minority. They hit the chicken exit. And you know what happens when you hit the chicken exit? You don't substantiate your hopes, and you don't have evidence that drives you to conviction about things you don't see because you didn't believe enough to obey. But when you get on the roller coaster of truth and you ride that roller coaster, I have seen teenagers multiple times, I'd say it's fair to say into the hundreds, get up at a campfire service and say, you just got to get right with your parents. There's peace like you can imagine. I have joy in my heart. You know what they're testifying? God substantiated my hopes. He's brought evidence into my life, and it could bring me to conviction about things I cannot see. But let's face it, friends, we hit the chicken exit. Instead of getting in line, coming right up there and saying, okay, God, I'm going to go invite that next door neighbor. You laid him on my heart. I'm going to go invite him. Or God, I'm going to give that person that gospel tract. Or I'm going to start conversation on the airplane, whatever. I mean, who knows how the Lord leads? We all know. And we all, so many times, don't we hit the chicken exit? Why do we? Because, my friend, we're not believing. Because faith always substantiates Bible hopes, and it always brings evidence that drives you to conviction about things you cannot see. Faith that drives you to obey, and the faith that really births itself in obedience, trusting God to enable you to do what you know you cannot do. Trusting Him to enable you to do it. Now let me conclude with this. Over the years, I've had certainly the privilege of watching young people take those steps of faith. And I will tell you, I tell teenagers now, we all enjoy God using us, all of us do, but I think I have a greater joy now. You know what my greater joy is? To see a 16-year-old kid, God use them, because I know it'll impact their life. Well, this was several years ago, but 1994, God began to burden my heart for Christian schools. I, at that time, had been 10 years with the war. It's Army versus Navy. We'd come in on a Wednesday, recruit Thursday, Friday, do the war Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It was largely evangelistic. I absolutely loved it, but God began to burden my heart for Christian schools. I went to Christian school from 6th grade to 12th grade, and I just knew that we'd come to churches with Christian schools, and they seemed to be unaffected. I knew we needed a program just for them, and God began to burden my heart, and I'll never forget the day in early 1994. I called a pastor in Pennsylvania. I said, Pastor, we're looking forward to being with you. He said, now, Brother Van Gelderen, please don't be offended, but I am not bringing you in to reach area kids. Now, he said, don't get me wrong. I hope some kids get saved. But he said, our Christian school is a mess. He said, I'm bringing you in to help our Christian school. And I couldn't believe it. I said, Pastor, you're not going to believe this. God's been burning my heart for Christian schools. I said, could we use you as a guinea pig? And I'm pretty sure I used those words. And he said, Brother Van Gelderen, you tell us what to do, and we will do anything you ask us to do. And boy, their word was good on that. Came up with a plan, gave it to them, and we came in, of course, kind of odd days, you know, coming in on Wednesday, leaving on Monday. Of course, we've now shifted our days for Monday through Friday, but that was before when we were just piling it in. And this was our first opportunity to do this. And so we had some competitions embedded in it and different things we were doing, and it was just the very first step. But I'll never forget, we got there, and it was a really bad Christian school. What I mean is you'd sit down with the kids and someone would just ignore you. You talk to them, they'd act like you weren't even there. I mean, it was clearly there was been some solidarity and some kids basically saying they didn't know us, but it was kind of like locked down, just locked down. Word was out, locked down. We'd be playing big ball games, and that 4-foot ball, I mean, most kids get into competition. That 4-foot ball would be heading some high school kid, and he'd step out of the way and let it hit the ground. I had 2 really competitive team captains. I thought they were going to kill kids. You know what I'm talking about? I had to get them aside. Don't react. Don't react. That's what they're trying to get you to do. Don't do it. I mean, we were in a battle. I'll never forget it. Well, we Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I knew most kids wouldn't come Saturday night. School was on lockdown. I mean, something was going on. It was peer group pressure, but it was more than that. I mean, it was verbal. It wasn't just felt. It was literally, there was something going on. Well, only the youth group kids came. Pretty much all the school kids boycotted it, and I think boycott is the fair word. Sunday night, I work with teenagers enough, I knew that we would break the boycott. Because I knew that some of those kids would rather come to the war than go to church. So they'd get permission to come to the war. Sure enough, there was a preacher's kid, 16 years old. He was not from that church. He was an area church. Asked his dad, and his siblings did, can we go to the war? He said, sure. Brought him over, dropped him off. His name was John. He was 16 years old. Never forget it. Sunday night, and we had a great time. Of course, we had kids saved the first night. We had a good crowd. It was mostly from the community, but we had a good crowd. And second night, good crowd. Again, probably half from the community and more school kids. And I remember that night I was preaching and came to the very end, and I noticed this young man, John, raised his hand, and he's crying. He leaves during the invitation. I thought, wow, I wonder what's going on. I thought he was a Christian school kid, preacher's kid. I don't know at that point I knew he was a preacher's kid. But anyway, I remember afterwards he came out probably 20, 30 minutes later, and pretty much everybody's gone, and he and his siblings were waiting for their dad to pick him up. They were the last ones, and John's crying. Finally, I remember I thought to myself, what's going on? So I walked up and said, okay, John, what in the world's going on? I'll never forget what he said. He said, Brother Van Gelderen, he said, tonight, while you were preaching, he said, God told me, if you don't get saved tonight, you will go to hell. And he just sobbed. He believed with all of his heart that he got saved his last opportunity. Well, I thought, wow, God's doing something. Next morning was our final chapel. I know Monday morning's just kind of a weird chapel. Most of the kids hadn't been there Saturday, Sunday. And so we got out and got up, and I don't know how to explain it. You could sense it. You could have cut the air with a knife. Now, if you don't know much about Christian schools, you're not going to understand this. But word had gotten out. John cracked. John cracked. You know, the only problem was John knew too much. Now, John hadn't said a word about anything, but he knew everything. And so they're all nervous. Like, what's going on? You know, all that kind of thing. You could sense it. Well, we did a little bit of our whatever war-type stuff, and I was about ready to preach and had probably one of the guys give a testimony, about ready to preach, when John stood to his feet and said, Brother Van Gelderen, could I say something? I thought to myself, I've been preaching all week. Nobody's listening. Sure, give it a shot. I didn't say it, but you think thoughts like that. And so John stands to his feet. He comes to the front, and he's got a cardboard box. And in the cardboard box, there were several cassette tapes. You have to explain that to some of these kids here what a cassette tape is. Anyway, there were several cassette tapes on the bottom, and John had literally taken the magnetic tape out of them. So there was literally just magnetic tape, all kind of just right there, and then the tapes were on the bottom, the cassette tapes. John comes up. Now, you could tell, you could hear a pin drop, because this kid's popular. I mean, he's one of the leaders. He comes up, he sets the box on a platform, was about that third step, and then he turned to the student body, and he told him what God was doing in his life. He said, now tonight, he said, now that I am saved or something like this, he said, I don't need that garbage music anymore. He said, tonight, I'm burning it. He said, I know some of you guys have garbage in your life too. He said, you put in that box, he said, we'll burn it together tonight. And I am telling you, friend, you could feel it. John goes back, sits down. I'm thinking, whoa. Next thing for me to do is preach. So I get up, I start preaching. I am halfway through the message, and I'm telling you, friend, I can't explain this. I cannot explain this. But I'm telling you, it was clear. I'm halfway through the message, and I don't know how to explain it. The Holy Spirit said to me, not audibly, but it could have been audible, because, it would have been no more clear if it was audible. The Holy Spirit said to me, you need to stop preaching right now. And it was so clear to me, I knew I'd be disobedient if I kept preaching. So, it was like a crash landing, just right in the middle of the message. I gave the invitation. I'll never forget that invitation. It was like a neutron bomb went off, spiritually that is. I mean, there are kids all over getting right, kids crying. It probably took us 1 to 2 hours as what I would call spiritual triage to deal with these kids. I remember an hour after the invitation, walking down to the halls of the school, kids sitting in the hallway weeping. I sit down next to him. I said, Bud, what's wrong? He said, man, I'm going straight to hell. Let them to Jesus. It was unbelievable. It was like that one right after another. Literally, our team, there's only 2 guys, myself and my wife, so it wasn't a lot of us, but we were doing everything we can to try to help that situation. Kids literally everywhere. The assistant pastor of that church, he's now a pastor in another church in Pennsylvania, told me later, many years later, he said that revival changed our school. He said they didn't go back. That generation, it changed our school. And you know what, my friends? It all started with a young man named John who hadn't even been saved 24 hours, who got out of the boat and obeyed Jesus. And do you know what happened? God brought evidence that brought all of us to conviction about things we couldn't see. That day, I will tell you, we all felt the wind. You know why? Because someone who hadn't even been saved very long believed God enough to obey him, trusting him to enable him to do what he could never do unless God enabled him to do it. Wow. That's what faith does. And I will tell you, friends, that's the idea why strongholds, wrong thinking needs to go, so that in its place comes right thinking that produces an obedience that is dependent upon the Lord Jesus, as we heard this morning, to enable us to do what we know we cannot do. And I will tell you, friend, I will tell you this. I believe this with all my heart. If we start living this way, you know what's going to happen? The wind is going to start to blow. Would it shock you if I told you this morning, that was 1994, that John is an assistant pastor in his church in Indiana? You know why? I haven't talked to him in these years. I really, one of these days, want to get a hold of him. But I suspect I know why. That day, the wind blew, and he's never forgotten it. Could I ask every head bowed, please, and every eye closed? We can agree about prayer. We can agree about corporate prayer. We can agree about dealing with our sin. We can agree about casting down strongholds. We can agree about living a dependent life. We're nothing, he's everything. We can agree about that, but faith doesn't do anything until we believe him enough to obey him in dependence on his strength, not ours. That's when faith substantiates Bible hopes and brings evidence into brings us to conviction about things we cannot see. Now, to be honest with you, in a message like this, I really don't even know if to give an invitation, how to give an invitation. But I will ask this. There may be a young man, young lady, God's stirring your heart to believe God for big things. So all I'm going to do is this. If you sense God doing something in your heart, and I realize we've had a lot of messages, so this is just kind of culminating it. If you sense God stirring your heart about something, it may be someone already in the ministry to take a step of faith God's been talking to you about. But I'm just going to invite you to come and kneel at the front. Just no music, no anything. Just come and kneel at the front. And take that kind of as an illustration and get out of the boat. So the invitation's open, so if you want to move to the front, you do that. Now again, I'm talking to people who you sense God has stirring you. There's a faith issue in your life, step that needs to be taken. Step on out. Could be a young man responding to the call to preach. Could be a preacher on a step of faith you know God's been dealing with you about. Could be a layman. God's touching your heart about something. I don't know. So I'm just going to sit down, and Dr. Flanders will close. I'll obviously give these men time and folks to give time to talk with God.